Hi, everyone. This is Merzia Maskati, and I'm the founder of the Speech Dysphagia Language Clinic. It's a clinic private clinic in Mumbai, and we offer speech, language dysphagia and occupational therapy services. We're a team of 11 therapists. So today I wanted to talk about introducing AAC for communication intervention. So I'm just going to share my PowerPoint. All right. Okay. So, I'm going to go over what is communication and AAC, who are the candidates for AAC, the difficulties and benefits of AAC, and I'm just going to go through some questions that I usually get in my practice. Okay. So what is communication? Okay, communication is how we exchange information by speaking or writing or using any medium, right? And that's basically how we get our thoughts and our feelings out. So communication does not mean to speak, okay? But unfortunately, it's always equated with speaking. So many times people say, oh, but my child is not communicating. No, your child is communicating. They may not be verbally speaking. Okay, so they communicate in other ways, by crying, by pointing, by vocalizing. Okay, so why is communication important? It's important because it not only expresses your wants and needs, okay, it also gives you an ability to transfer information. Okay, you can talk about an event that happened. You can talk about something that you're seeing. Okay, it also brings about a social closeness where you're telling jokes with people, you're expressing sympathy. It allows you to use manners, and it gives you an internal dialogue with yourself. So again, when we are stuck and only a child pointing to communicate, they're only expressing their wants and needs, and we're not addressing all the other reasons why communication is important. Okay, so what is AAC? AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication Systems. It's the way you share your ideas and feelings without talking. We all use forms of AAC every day. You know, we write text messages, we have facial expressions, we write notes to people. So the AAC tools that are now constantly evolving as technology is evolving and that are available to us are a whole lot of communication devices and a whole lot of ways to access those communication devices for people who have difficulties with access. Who needs AAC? Everybody. So people who have developing speech, people who have hard to understand speech, people who have no speech, people who have lost their speech, okay, who have a temporary loss of speech or have unreliable speech. So for an example, okay, like my sister had her wisdom teeth removed, and that was a temporary loss of speech. She couldn't talk for, that one day that she was in the hospital. So I actually made her like a communication board so she could like point out and call out to us. Or, to say that she was in pain or to communicate those needs at that time. So you can't decide AAC based on the diagnosis of the person. So similarly, there are no typical or average AAC users. As long as there is a discrepancy between what they are able to, what their needs are and what their abilities are, then they qualify for AAC services, okay? There are no prerequisites. You don't have to have a certain cognitive level. You don't need to be of a certain age. You don't need to have, accessibility. There is absolutely no prerequisite. You have to presume competence. Okay. And I will come to what is presuming competence later on. So people report that without an AAC system earlier, they felt socially isolated. They felt frustrated. They felt shut out of important decisions in their life. And with the AAC, they feel they have stronger friendships, deeper relationships, they have more social interactions, they have more independence, they get more respect from others, and they just have greater participation in their communities and in their families. The most important part of an effective AAC system is having a communication partner who keeps the individual motivated and stimulated. You have to provide opportunities for the person to communicate. You have to create an environment in which they have a need to communicate. Okay, the partners need to assess the AAC system on an ongoing basis. They need to keep modifying it as the individual's needs and abilities change. Partners provide aided input and modeling needed for them to use the AAC systems, and I will come to what is modeling later on. Okay, so we can start off with some questions that I have commonly heard in my practice. Okay, so one is, my child does not have communicative intent. So how do I start with AAC? Okay, so earlier, long ago in the 1970s and 80s, that the AAC therapists believed that there were prerequisites to using AAC, that you had to understand cause and effect, you had to understand that, you know, symbols represent objects and actions, you have to have a certain degree of motor control, you have to have a minimum level of language understanding. But now we have better AAC systems, okay, that you don't even need to use symbols. You can import real life pictures. There's more research, there's better teaching strategies. So now we know that there are no prerequisite skills needed for AAC. We presume competence. What is presuming competence? It's the least dangerous assumption, okay? It's basically that you believe that the person has something to say and that everyone can learn, okay? And it's far more dangerous to not believe and then not expose the person to any sort of system. So you provide an AAC system that gives them the chance to develop real language, okay? And you give them the right tools, the right support. The belief now is that an AAC learner can never truly prove themselves without a full AAC system, okay? So earlier, people used to think that, okay, this child has limited abilities, so let's just use some low-tech few pictures and leave it at that. But the thing is, you'll never know how much your child is capable of, how much they can learn, unless you give them the full system. It's the same thing as when you talk to a child. You don't talk in only 2 words when they aren't speaking, right? We give them the full language. So we should give them the full language even on an AAC system and not just use a few symbols, okay? But now, having a communication device does not make you an effective communicator any more than having a piano makes you a musician. So if you just have that piano, it can just sit there the same way, and you can buy an AAC system and it can just sit there until someone teaches you how to use it and models it for you and creates an environment in which you are required to use it. So the next question is, do I have to use the AAC system? Meaning, as a caregiver, as a parent, as a therapist, do I have to use it? Yes, absolutely. Okay, if someone spoke only one particular language, like Marathi or French, you have to speak to them in that language to communicate. So similarly, for children who are learning how to use AAC, AAC is their language. So you have to use that to communicate with them. If you don't provide this input and expect them to use the AAC system, it's going to fail, right? Because they won't know how to. And they have to see the system being used for them to believe that it's, you know, working, and it's motivating for them to see it being used. So what is modeling? Okay, modeling means that you point to words on the AAC tool as you speak. And it's the most valuable strategy that you have for AAC learners. It's also called aided language stimulation, aided language input, or natural aided language. Okay, and it's to be used throughout the AAC journey. So the next question that happens is, how many words should I model at a time? So the rule of thumb is always model language one step above the AAC user's current skill level. Okay. So if the person's not using the system yet to communicate, okay, you model at a single word level. So an example is, if you're leaving to go to a shop or you're going to grandma's house, you can verbally say it's time to go to grandma's house, and you just press go on the AAC system. If the person's already at a 1-word level, then you add a word when you model. So you can press go and grandma while you're saying that whole sentence, okay? So you keep increasing your modeling depending on the language of the AAC learner. Okay, should you model every word and symbol on the app? No, okay? There is something called core words, and these are about 50 to 400 words that make up the majority of everything that we say. Using core words, AAC users are able to get about 80% of the words they need to make their sentences, okay? The remaining 20% are pretty easily picturable. So we need to model only the 80, the 20 they will learn on their own, Okay, and you teach the learner how to combine those words to form sentences and express their thoughts and their ideas. So this is an example of a core word page. Okay, so these are the words you teach, you actually model. For how long should I use the AAC system? Okay, so it's again, for how long should you expose a child to language? All day, every day, right? So the AAC learner needs to see the AAC system being used regularly and reliably. It cannot be used only during speech therapy sessions. It cannot be used for 5 minutes in the day, 10 minutes in the day. No, it has to be used the entire day. And you have to model. When you communicate with a child, you model using the device. That device has to be easily accessible over there at all times, right? Okay. Sometimes parents say, my child takes me to what they want. Okay, how do I use the AAC system instead? Now, taking a parent to what they want is the child's most, it's the first thing they'll do, right? But you're trying to teach them a different system. So you have to first model it for them so that they can see that this is more effective, right? And you don't have to model grammatically complete sentences, but focus on the keywords. So you can model something like, I go supermarket, get eggs, while saying that I went to the supermarket to get the eggs, right? So you talk about yourself too using the AAC system. Another common question is, my child uses vocalization, signs, points. I understand what they're saying. Do I still need the AAC system with me at all times? The point is yes, because what happens when that signing or that vocalizing falls short, right? A parent may understand everything a child wants, but someone outside may not. Right? So an unfamiliar listener may not. Also, again, we're only presuming that the child wants to express their needs and wants, but there's a lot more to communication. They might want to express their thoughts, their feelings. They might want to interact in a social setting, right? So they may have much more to say than they can communicate only with their gestures. So they need to have all the language available to them at all times so that they can use the system when they need it. Okay. Some concerns are that what if my child has behavioral issues, such as throwing things, right? So obviously you don't want to buy something expensive and that is so delicate that may break. Okay, but again, aggressive behaviors may stem from a frustration and not being able to communicate. Okay, so you can also model that emotion, press frustrated, and you can say that I know you're frustrated right now because your tower fell. When the child is calmer, you can model an alternative behavior, like say, when you are upset, you can take 5 deep breaths. Okay. But also, if the child is throwing something, right, what else can you do? All iPads and tablets come with protective, you can order protective covers and screen guards for them that prevent against any damage, right? So you can have soft, squishy covers. You can have, hard ones. You can use mounts or straps so it doesn't fall off, right? And it's strapped to a place or strapped to the child. What if you're in situations where it's messy, it's wet, you're near a pool, or it might be too bright and you can't see a device? So what do? You can use live tech options at that point. You can take paper printouts of your high-tech device and have them with you. You can also create a communication book and have that with you, or you can have a core vocabulary poster board. Many teachers put this up in classrooms so that the child can have access to it at that point, So this is an example of a communication board. You can have something like this put up in your kitchen, and lots of places in your house so the child has easy access to show you what they want. Okay. Very common question is, what if my child becomes dependent on the AAC system and loses the motivation to speak? Okay, so now this is not supported by any available data. Okay, there's enough evidence to prove that it actually enhances the development of spoken communication. It reduces frustration, it reduces behavior issues, and it improves learning outcomes. When you take away the pressure of speaking, some children develop more speech, right? It's so easy to press buttons, my child won't make the effort to talk. To this, I would say is that communication is supposed to be easy, right? Why are we trying to test children? Why are we trying to make something difficult for them that's already hard for them, right? You don't force a child who has a visual impairment to see without their glasses, right? You don't force a child who's hearing impaired to hear without their hearing aid. So why are we forcing a child who is not speaking to speak all the time, right? We should give them something that's an easier alternative for them. My child can respond to questions, but is not initiating conversation. How do I encourage that, right? So again, here you want to start at a level higher than the child is at. So they're already responding to questions and they want to be social, but they don't have the skills needed to carry on the conversation. So you can store messages in your AAC system. Again, this takes the pressure off the user and allows them to be more actively involved in the conversations. You can store messages like the child can just press and say, okay, how was your weekend? You know, and you can teach them, you can model how to, you know, press that when you meet somebody. Okay, what do I do if my child keeps playing with the buttons on the device and doesn't use it meaningfully? How do I redirect him? Okay, allow the child to randomly press buttons. Okay, it's core, and allow them to play because they're trying to just figure out this new system for them. It's part of the learning process and it shouldn't be discouraged. Okay. Supposing they are pressing something while you're actually doing something else. So you have to acknowledge the attempt at communication. Okay, so say that I know you'd like to do a puzzle, but we're eating lunch right now. So would you like to do the puzzle after lunch? It's the same thing as if the child was to say something like, Mama, I don't want to eat, right? You'd acknowledge that attempt. So the same way you acknowledge it on a device. How do I ensure that all caregivers and teachers use the device? Okay, so for this, education is the most important. You have to educate everyone involved. You have to provide support and training, and you have to keep providing the support and training because the user's needs will also keep changing. And always make the AAC system available. It should not be left in the cupboard. It should not be put in the bag. It has to be easily accessible at all times, right? You have to make sure it's charged. You have to make sure it's turned on. And every environment should have quick access to the AAC system. So everyone at home, everyone in school, or any other environment the person may go to. And always have a backup plan for when it's not available, which is the lighter tech options like having printouts, right? Won't using an app lead to too much screen time? Okay. So in this, okay, when you use a gadget for communication, it's not considered as screen time, right? When you use a gadget to play a video game or play anything or listen to music or whatever, that's a solitary activity and it's recreational. A gadget to communicate is interactive, right? So you have to keep interaction and recreation separate. If you can, get two separate devices, right? Otherwise, lock your device that you're using for communication purposes so that the person cannot go on to other things while they are communicating. Okay, coming to what if the child has other impairments, like a visual impairment, what do you do? Okay, so most AAC apps allow you, like Avaz, allow you to change the grid size and you can zoom in, right? You can also have a touch screen. Okay, you can also change the contrast. In the touchscreen devices allow you to change the contrast, right? You can also add a key guard. So that gives some sort of tactile cues for navigation for someone who's visually impaired, right? This is an example of a key guard, okay? What if a person has motor difficulties and can't use a touchscreen? So then you can control the computer or the iPad or the tablet with, you can link it to a switch and control it with any part of your body, like your foot, your hand, whole hand, by blinking your eye or moving your head. You can even hit your head against the switch to activate the device, okay? So these sort of methods of controlling an AAC device are called access methods, right? So this is an eye gaze system. So it activates by you, the user looks at the required item, and then by looking at it for a few seconds, it activates. Okay, and these are examples of switches. They come in different sizes, shapes, and colors. Okay, and you can adjust how much pressure you need to activate it. So, and you can activate it by any part of your body. Like I said, your whole hand, a finger, your head, your knee, your foot, anything, right? But the thing is, you need to work with a team to know, like a physiotherapist, to help you know the position on which to put the switch, where to put it, and how to get the child to access it. Okay. I wanted to point out the difference between AAC and visual support. I feel these terms are used a lot interchangeably, but they are two different terms, right? So AAC is a communication system, but visual supports are something that you use to teach communication, okay? AAC is driven by the person with communication difficulties. Visual support is something that is driven by the clinician or by the parent. Okay, so examples of AAC systems are like Avaz and CoTalk, and example of visual supports are like social stories and visual schedules. So I'll just quickly go over some sort of visual support. So this is an example of a visual schedule, which is it's pictures depicting the session, right? So this is just to give a child an idea of what's going to come in the session, and they also know after how many things they get to go home. So that kind of reduces their anxiety. You can also use it for the child's daily routine at home. So like, they finish brushing, then they finish a bath, and you pull a picture off as you're done, right? You can use highly preferred toys as reinforcers in between to increase focus for non-preferred activities. So you can do, if you want the child to read a book with you, you can do book, and then they get to blow bubbles. And then maybe they get to do some writing, and then maybe they can like get Play-Doh or something. So it increases their focus for non-preferred activities. Coming to the last bit of what are social stories, right? Social stories are a social learning tool that's used to teach people, mostly people on the spectrum, but it can be used for anybody, expected social rules, or to help them become comfortable in a social situation, right? So the people who develop social stories are called authors, and they work on behalf of the child, adolescent, or adult, right? Which is the audience. So how do you write a social story? You think of the goal you want to work on, you gather information, you write it, you share it with the child, and you revise it as you need to. Well-written social story answers WH questions. It's written in the first person. It's flexible, and it uses positive language, okay? How do you introduce the story? Always introduce it in a relaxed setting. In other words, don't introduce it while the event is occurring, okay? Don't use it as a punishment. Set some time aside as a special time for reading it, okay? And incorporate it into the daily routine. So you have to do it for, like, if the person's nervous about, say, going to the dentist or getting a haircut, you have to introduce the story several weeks before, and you have to go say it repeatedly for the child to kind of get it. So this is an example of a social story that hands are not for hitting, right? So when you feel upset, I sometimes hit people. That's not a smart choice. When I hit them, it hurts them. I need to stop. I have to keep my hands to myself, and I can use my words when I'm upset. So you're giving an alternative behavior. When I make smart choices, I feel happy and I make others happy. Thank you.